Here's an introduction to what happened at FTX, a cryptocurrency exchange that imploded late last year. Hi there, I'm Jeff, and this is Plain English, where you can upgrade your English by listening to lessons about current events and trending topics. This is lesson number 542 on Monday, January 30th, 2023. Just 2 days left until February. Last Monday, we talked about banking and the ways banks can get in trouble. The lesson was an oversimplification, but the basic idea is still helpful. A financial institution can have a liquidity crisis or a solvency crisis. Both of them are bad, but a solvency crisis is really bad. We talked about that in lesson 540. So if you haven't heard it yet, go back and listen now. You're going to want to keep that vocabulary in mind as you listen to today's lesson about FTX, the failed cryptocurrency exchange. The expression we'll talk about today is pay up, and I have a quote of the week. Let's get going. FTX International was a cryptocurrency futures exchange. In fact, the name FTX stood for Futures Exchange. This is not a new thing. Futures exchanges have been around for 300 years. There are futures exchanges for all kinds of things: oil, gold, soybeans, orange juice, coffee, even for financial things like interest rates, stocks, or now cryptocurrencies. Here is what happens in a futures exchange. Customers bet on the value of assets without having to own the assets. Their bets are just contracts. You can bet on an asset's value going up. You can bet on the value going down. The exchange doesn't care one way or another. They sit in the middle and settle the bets. They make their own profit by taking a small fee off every bet. Futures exchanges make sure that customers don't make bets that they can't afford to lose. This is important. If you win a bet on a futures exchange, the exchange needs to pay you what you won. But the exchange can only pay the winner if they take money from the loser. This is why every customer needs to post collateral. The exchange doesn't just trust you to pay up if you lose. Posting collateral means you give the exchange something of value and they can keep it if you lose your bet. Collateral can be money, stocks, bonds, other currencies, things like that. The point is, you have to give them enough valuable assets before you start the betting. The exchange determines how much to take in advance. The exchange keeps track of this all. And if you start to lose too much, the exchange asks you for more collateral. If you can't give more collateral, it shuts you down before you lose too much. This is a complicated and risky business, to say the least. The big futures exchanges like the Chicago Mercantile Exchange and the London Metal Exchange have lots of complicated rules and systems to protect themselves and their customers. FTX International was a futures exchange where people could bet on cryptocurrencies going up and going down. Like at other exchanges, customers deposited money and other cryptocurrencies as collateral. FTX promised to keep track of the bets, take from the losers, and give to the winners, just like other exchanges do. Well, now is where I'm telling you what the US government alleges FTX to have done. None of this has been proven in court yet, and the founder of FTX has pleaded not guilty to all of the charges against him. But here are the allegations. FTX did have a complicated risk management computer system that kept track of the bets, requested collateral, and settled bets, just like every other exchange. Only theirs, they said, was better. If customers started losing too much, FTX asked for more collateral or shut them down. So far, so good. Just one problem. One customer was exempt from the system. That one customer was called Alameda Research, 90% of which was owned by, just wait, the founder of FTX, Sam Bankman-Fried. Alameda Research made highly risky bets on cryptocurrencies and lost those bets. They lost big. Not only that, but the collateral that they gave FTX also fell in value. So they lost their bets and their collateral was worth less. But instead of being shut down, like any other customer would have been, instead of being shut down, Alameda kept making bets without having to post more valuable collateral, and they kept losing. Now, for them, it was like going to a casino and getting free chips. Another crypto company, a rival to FTX, noticed some of what was going on and suspected that Alameda might not be able to pay for all its losing bets. This other investor published a note very publicly saying they thought a big FTX customer had not posted good collateral. So this made other FTX customers worry. Remember, if a loser can't pay, then the winners won't get what they rightfully won. And nobody wants to be on an exchange if they won't be paid their winnings. So when FTX customers saw this research note, they understandably decided to close their accounts and try to get their money back. And a lot of them did that all at once. If this sounds familiar from last week, it should. All the customers wanted their deposits back at once. FTX couldn't pay them out right away. Is this a liquidity problem or a solvency problem? The US government says it's a solvency problem. They say that Alameda lost big bets and didn't post enough collateral, and they were exempt from all the controls that should have prevented this from happening. The result was that one customer, Alameda, was able to bet with other customers' money. Alameda kept losing, and those other customers didn't know about it. The charges allege that FTX committed fraud by doing this. Sam Bankman-Fried resigned as CEO and was later arrested at FTX headquarters in the Bahamas. He says that this was a liquidity crisis. If he had been allowed to stay on as CEO just a little bit longer, he would have been able to find an outside investor to help him weather the storm. He says he would have been able to pay out all the winners. He just needed a little bit of liquidity in the short term. He says the assets were all there. And he says the outside investor who published that critical note was just looking to hurt FTX. Well, a few things are happening now. The U.S. subsidiary of FTX is in bankruptcy in an American court. Second, Sam Bankman-Fried will be on trial for fraud, lying to customers, and money laundering. He's also facing lawsuits from several U.S. government agencies. The bankruptcy and the trial and the lawsuits will take a long time, but I have a feeling there won't ever be a satisfactory explanation for what happened. It will be good for one person, though. The journalist Michael Lewis was coincidentally spending time at FTX during its fateful last days. He's negotiating a combined book and movie deal with Apple now. This was an oversimplification, and if you follow this, you know there's a lot more to the story. But this was the basic outline of what happened and the charges against FTX. Now, there are some jaw-dropping allegations in the bankruptcy case too. FTX was so sloppy with its accounting and bank accounts, customers were depositing money to the wrong places, and FTX didn't keep track of who had deposited what and where. They didn't know what money belonged to their customers and what money belonged to their company. And these are things you have to get right if you're an exchange. Like, the whole purpose of an exchange is to keep track of this stuff accurately. So during all this time, their 20-something CEO and top executives decided to act like 20-somethings with a lot of money and no adults around. They bought a Super Bowl commercial. They bought luxury cars, luxury real estate. They sponsored the Miami Heat basketball arena. They donated to politicians, made big gifts to charity, sponsored conferences, went on television, and acted like big business moguls. But they were doing it all with other people's money, not their own, according to the charges. And now there are about 9 million people who aren't getting their money back from this exchange. And if convicted, the now 30-year-old founder would face up to 115 years in jail. Today, I'm going to show you how to use the phrasal verb pay up. It's a variation on the word pay. You can pay for lunch, you can pay for a car, you can pay for a house, you can pay your rent or your mortgage on the first of the month. But pay up means to pay a debt in full, usually if it's difficult or if you don't want to do it. Pay up is what we say when you've accumulated a debt and eventually you have to pay the full balance. So imagine you have a poker game with friends. At the beginning of the night, you all decide to buy in for $20. At the beginning of the night, you don't take the money out of your wallets. You just divide the chips and you'll settle the bets later. So imagine that one player at the table loses all his chips. He's out of the game. The other players continue, and eventually it gets late and you decide to go home. Anyone who lost chips has to pay up. They have to settle their debt. That one player who lost all his chips has to pay $20. The time comes to pay up. This is nice, right? Nobody likes to lose $20, but it's not too much, and we're all among friends. And of course, the losers will pay up at the end of the night, and the winners will go home just a little richer. That's not how it works on a futures exchange as you learned today. On a futures exchange, the players bet big amounts of money. You can win big on a futures exchange, and you can lose big. And guess what? The exchanges don't trust their customers to pay up when they lose. It's not like your friendly poker game where you can just pay up, pay your debt at the end of the night. On a big exchange, you have to post collateral to cover your losses, and you have to do that before the game starts. A long time ago, and this is not something I'm proud of, but a long time ago, I accumulated a lot of unpaid parking tickets. I lived on a street where they closed one side of the street occasionally, but they never told you when they were going to do it. So I wouldn't know when they were going to close the street, and I'd get a ticket because I didn't move my car, because I didn't know. And I didn't pay the tickets right away out of anger, frustration, and lack of money. Naively, I think I hoped the city would just forget about it. Well, unlike FTX, the city of Chicago kept meticulous accounting records, and they knew exactly how much I owed in parking tickets. And they sent me a note, and not a nice note either, saying I had to pay up, or the next time they saw my car on the street, they would just tow it away and keep it. The time had come to pay up. I had to pay my debt in full. I didn't want to, but when the city threatened to impound my car, well, I decided to pay up. I decided to pay my full debt. And eventually, I got an apartment with a garage. Big companies face lawsuits all the time, and they defend themselves. They pay expensive lawyers to help them avoid losing judgments in lawsuits. For the last 12 years, Google has been facing a lawsuit from California residents who say the company misused their personal data. And for 12 years, Google has avoided paying. But the company recently decided to pay up. Instead of going to trial, they reached an agreement with the plaintiffs, and Google will be paying up. Like me with my parking tickets, they probably aren't going to enjoy paying the money, but they determined that they had to, so they will be paying up. We're going to race through the quote of the week since this is already a long lesson. Here we go. From George Orwell, an autobiography is only to be trusted when it reveals something disgraceful. So if you're reading an autobiography, you should only trust it if the author discloses all the bad stuff about himself or herself. Otherwise, you can't trust it, because Orwell says the whole truth about everyone includes some of the bad stuff. So that's today's quote. An autobiography is only to be trusted when it reveals something disgraceful. Well, you can trust plain English because I tell you the disgraceful stuff, my parking tickets. Well, that's all for today's lesson. This had a lot of complicated vocabulary in it, post-collateral, settle a bet, stuff like that. So if you think a transcript would be helpful, just visit plainenglish.com/542 The transcript is free. Just read it as you listen, and I bet you'll pick up a few new words if you do that. Coming up on Thursday, what happens when a cemetery is full? A shortage of burial sites is causing grave concern in the world's biggest and most congested cities. That's on Thursday. See you then.